So in this video we're going to talk about completing the square. Now we have encountered this completing the square thing 3 different times. The first time was solving quadratic equations. Second time was putting standard form equations into vertex form. And the third time was taking a circle equation to change it into graphing form. So we're going to look at those 3 things in this video. So here's a quadratic equation. If we solve it by completing the square, the first step we do is we take the c, and whatever c is, we add and or subtract that amount from both sides. So this is a positive 5 on the left. We're going to subtract 5 to both sides, and this is what we end up with. We leave a space here between the negative 12x and the equal sign because we're going to add something to both sides. All right, so the thing we add to both sides, we look at our b here is negative 12. And we take half of negative 12 and we square it. So half of negative 12 is negative 6. Negative 6 squared is 36. So that means we add 36 to both sides. All right, next we take this and we factor it. So this in its factored form is a perfect square factoring. It is that way because we made it that way. When we added 36 here, we made it into a quantity that factors, having the 2 factors the same. So we just write it x minus 6 times x minus 6. We just write as x minus 6 quantity squared. And on this side we have 31. Okay, next step, we take the square root of both sides. So the square root of x minus 6 squared, those things undo each other. So we just have x minus 6 equals plus or minus the square root of 31. And we isolate the x. So we get 6 plus or minus root 31. Hopefully you remember that. Maybe you don't remember this if you jumped into doing quarter 4 work after the beginning. I think we did this at the beginning of quarantine. So if you want more instruction on this, go back into Google Classroom and dig around on assignments or videos you haven't watched yet. You might find it. Okay, so converting quadratic equations from standard form to vertex form. So standard form is when it looks like this, and vertex form is when it looks like this. So we can do that by completing the square. So here's what we do. We take the x terms and we group them together, leaving a space, and we scoot c over and ignore it for a little bit. Okay, the next thing we do is we take half of b and square it. So 9 squared is 81. We're going to add 81 inside here. Since we're working on the right side of the equation only, we're not balancing out with the left side. If we add 81 there, we need to subtract 81 here. Okay, so then we factor stuff that's in parentheses. Again, it's a perfect square, so we know how it's going to factor. And we combine c with the negative 81, and that's negative 92. So now this is in vertex form, and we know that the vertex would be at negative 9, negative 92. We're going to do another example. It's a little more challenging. I'm going to pause the video. Okay, so when we're putting it in vertex form, when a is not 1, what you want to do is take the x terms, factor out whatever that a is, and I'm choosing to make the x term have an even coefficient because I don't want to get, too fractiony and ugly with this because I don't want to scare you, make you cry. So anyway, we factor out the 2 out of the x parts. That's just what I did here. Factored the 2 out, left some room to complete the square, scooted over the constant term, so it's out here. Okay, next we're going to ignore the 2 while we figure out what b is, take half of it and square it. And that's what we're going to add in here. And now this is when we have to be careful, and this is where it differs. So on the last example, we subtracted 81 because we added 81. When we put a 9 inside these parentheses, it's actually 9 times 2 that we're adding to the right side of this equation. We actually just added 18. So we're going to subtract 18 also. Okay, now we come in with cleanup crew, comes in, puts it in the form that we need it in. This will be x minus 3 quantity squared, and then 5 minus 18 is a negative 13. All right, now it's in vertex form. The vertex for this would be 3, negative 13. Okay, then the last way we have seen completing the square used is fairly recently in our circle unit. So I wanted to go over that too. I'm clumping all these together so you can see some kind of continuity in what we're doing here, and some overlap. Okay, so a review on how to do this. What we want to do is gather up the x terms and gather up the y terms together. So I'm rearranging this, and on the other side I'll put the constant term. Should leave a little more space here. Let me fix that. We're leaving spaces because we're going to complete each part of this. Okay, so let's take a look at completing this, making this a perfect square trinomial. We would need to add 9. So then we'd need to add 9 over here. And then this one, to complete this square, we would need to add 25. So we'd have to add 25 over here. Okay, and we're going to factor these. So this will be x minus 3 squared. So it'll be y minus 5 squared. And on the other side we have a 9. So this is a circle with the center at 3, 5, and a radius of 3. All right, so those are the different ways we've used completing the square. Hope you have a good day.